Our last speaker for this evening is Chinguun Mungunshagai, and her speech is titled A Cultural Kaleidoscope, Preserving Our Languages.
I want to ask you a question. Could you right now name me an extinct language? Just shout out your answers and I'll wait. Not a single answer? Well, some of you guys might have been thinking of Latin or Greek. And while those are great answers, those are dead languages and not necessarily extinct ones. The world we live in today has a little over 7,000 spoken languages, including different dialects and variations. And of those 7,000 something languages, 50%, some researchers might even claim 90, are bound to go extinct within the next century. How devastating is that? But what's even more shocking is that linguists have concluded that every 2 weeks, a language dies off. So, what exactly is the extinction of a language, and what are the causes leading to this consequence? Well, first off, a dead language has no current native speakers. Great examples are, as previously said, Latin or Greek. Whereas for an extinct language, not only does it not have any native speakers, it doesn't have any speakers at all, and it's nearly impossible to recover. Some notable examples are the language of Eyak from Alaska or Tillamook from the Tillamook tribe from coastal Oregon. Pinpointing the exact reasons for the downfall of a language is quite difficult as it's a very complicated topic. But modern researchers have concluded that it has 3 major factors. And the first one is a concept called language shifting or language replacement. It's essentially a concept where native speakers of one language eventually switch and adapt to another, and this causes a natural decline in the original language. And although it can happen for a variety of reasons, it's most likely prominent in migrated individuals or refugees. And the second is globalization, especially with how significantly it's accelerated within the past few decades within our generation Z. And whenever I use this term globalization, people tend to think of the bigger aspects. They tend to think of the international market and the economical sides to it. But what most people tend to overlook are the more minor and subtle ways that cultural globalization takes over us. It's us going on TikTok, watching YouTube videos, us consuming pop culture, and even listening to K-pop. All of these count. And usually what all this media does is that it promotes a single or a few prominent languages that dictate and dominate over the rest of the 6,000 something languages. And this leads to lingua franca being chosen over indigenous languages. Lingua franca, what is that? Well, lingua franca is a term used to refer to the most commonly spoken language of an era. And for us, it's obviously English. And English is such a powerful language that it's dominating over every corner of the earth, even here in Mongolia, here in UB, where our youth feel more confident speaking and conversing in English, expressing ourselves in English, and consuming media that's in English, just because it's a little bit easier, just because it comes a little bit more naturally than Mongolian. Whereas whenever you try and translate whatever it is into Mongolian, we feel stuck and it's hard. I tend to experience this the most whenever I try and translate the smallest of things for my grandparents. I feel like a toddler once again, trying to express these big ideas and these big emotions with the words that I don't know of. And I grow frustrated. So then I sigh and I stop. And it's in moments like this where I realize that Mongolian is starting to exist more in my imagination than in practice for me. And the third major reason is historical events. And the best way I can explain this so that it's comprehensible is with an example that we should all be aware of. In Inner Mongolia, Mongolian medium schools, or schools that are taught in Mongolian, are being forced to switch to entirely into Chinese as a way to eradicate and diminish the use of Mongolian within the community. It's much similar to how, between the 19th and the 21st century, indigenous children were forced to learn English in residential schools. Whenever systematic erasures and policies such as these are enforced by the law, the people grow afraid and they unwillingly have to let go. And a day without a language eventually transforms into months, years, and decades of unuse. However, it is good that we are spreading awareness about #saving the Mongolian language. And it's good that we are protesting against these forms of aggressive assimilation that have tragic long-term effects, resulting in linguistic genocide and the mass extinction of the rich culture of languages. It essentially buries everything behind and leaves nothing for the future. So, why are languages so important, and why do I keep emphasizing on their preservation? Well, you could take language as the hidden key, the gateway, or even a window to an abundance of valuable knowledge. Thousands of years' worth of rich culture and history, its heritage, its tradition, family, and ultimately, it's a piece of ourselves, a part of our self-identity. And once that key is locked and the gate is blocked, all of that is gone forever. One way we can preserve our languages for the future is by working around English as a lingua franca and creating a global pidgin English. A pidgin is a mixture of two languages. For our case, it's English and Mongolian. And what's so great about this is that it creates the opportunity for native Mongolians to communicate with people all over the world while sparing them of the difficult task of having to learn a completely new language, a language that would essentially challenge their Mongolian. This idea was first originally expressed in a research article, and you could sort of understand it as a programming language, where you don't have to speak the same language as the other person, but you still understand how their code works. Another idea is immersion schools. They're a wonderful way to spread language evolution through children, the future. The more they engage and involve themselves with the language, the more likely it'll be carried on into the future. A great example of this would be from a survey from the government of New Zealand, where in New Zealand, they have Maori immersion schools. Maori is a native language that was critically endangered in the 1970s. But now, with the help of immersion schools, it now thrives through more than 13,000 children. Isn't that amazing? The very culture, the unique culture of Maori in its language is kept alive by these very children into the future. And lastly, we have the actions that we all have the power to do. Supporting cultural organizations, creating dictionaries, volunteering to learn and advocate about all the different languages and their significance. We can publish books full of stories, legends, and language of our own so that it can reach and resonate with just one more person. And ultimately, we can encourage others to freely speak in their native tongue, asking them to teach you something from their language, inquiring about it, and expressing that it's important. Nelson Mandela once quoted that if you speak to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. But if you speak to a man in his own language, that goes to his heart. And as we evolve into a global society, and Mongolia takes steps further internationally, let us not leave out the isolated languages. The languages like Mongolian that wash over us like a warm, comforting hug and have raised us the way we are. Let us create a society where linguistic diversity flourishes and where we, the youth, embrace the language of the heart. Thank you.